Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. Welcome to a new real life car review. In this episode I'm driving the Toyota GR Supra GT4 100th edition Tribute. Quite a mouthful, but this is a special edition to celebrate the sales success of the Toyota GR Supra GT4 race car, which is not commercially available. This car is also very limited production, only 100 were made. And what makes this car special? Well, let's find out in this real life car review. And let us start with doing a quick walk around. So, the GT4 100th edition Tribute. What makes this car special? How can you recognize it? Well, you can recognize it by its color, which is only available for this special edition. It's called Victory Orange over here, but I also seen it called Plasma Orange. I think it's the exact same color. So apart from the color, how can you tell this is the special edition? Well, it comes with those add-ons to the front bumper. It has those nice 19-inch wheels, and they are matte black, and they come with these 4-pot brake calipers with a GR badging on there. The tires are wrapped in Michelin tires, Pilot Super Sports, and on the back you also get black brake calipers, but they're single pot brake calipers. We have this spoiler on the rear, but that is optional for this car, so you have to buy it. And of course it comes with those GR badges. So how can you tell that this really is a special edition? Well, there's a badge over here on the side of the dashboard that says 1 of 100 units produced, and it also mentions that this car is produced by Magna's Tire in Graz, Austria. One thing that I find a bit disappointing that they didn't give the car unique numbers. If you want to make 100 of these, why not give them a unique number like the LC Ultimate Edition? Let's head over to the other side. On the passenger side of the dashboard there's a special carbon fiber inlay with the model name and the full name of this car, which I've been staring to an entire week just to memorize the official name of this car. Anyway, there are more things that set this car apart, but I'll show you that in the interior segment. Let's start off by having a peek under the hood. Before you can open the hood, you have to know that this car shares its technical underpinnings with BMW, and as such, if you want to open the hood, you have to pull the hood release twice before it opens. And the first thing that you'll notice is that how large this hood actually is. It covers the side of the wheels, so if you ever start using this car as it's intended as a fun play car, chances are you may slide off the road or get involved in a little fender bender. Be advised that you have to replace the complete hood if it's pretty severe damage. But yeah, that's up to you. If you can afford a car like this, you probably can afford those damage repairs. So let's remove this plastic cover over here. When it was rumored that Toyota would introduce a new Supra, it quickly became clear that they were developing this car in cooperation with BMW. If you look at the exterior, you can see it looks nothing like a BMW. It has its complete own design, and admittedly I must say it doesn't look like any other Toyota either, but maybe that's a good thing, maybe it's a bad thing, that's up to you. But anyway, if you start picking into the technical underpinnings of this car, it's all BMW. Drivetrain, suspension, steering, I'll get into that later. But here it is, it's the B58. This car is also available with a 2-liter BMW engine, which I have to look it up. The bore is 82 millimeters and the stroke is 94.6 millimeters, so it's a real under-square engine, long stroke engine. However, this engine loves to rev. The 4-cylinder makes about, let me look it up, 260 horsepower, and in this car you get 340 horsepower out of almost 3 liters of displacement. Torque is 500 newton meters, and the torque is available from 1500 to 4500 rpm. And its peak power, 340 horsepower, is delivered at 6,500 rpm. Twin scroll turbo, double VANAS, I don't know exactly that much about BMW engines, but I can tell you this: I love this engine. It has a nice all-round character. When you're driving slow, cruising around, this engine has a nice typical inline-six hum, and it's so calm and soothing to drive, and just hums along. And even at idle, when you're sitting at a traffic light, there's a nice deep hum tone coming from the engine, which is just great. And just for normal, just say sporty driving, you don't even have to pass 3,500 RPMs, and well, the car is quicker than anything on the road probably. When you start revving the engine up above 4,000 RPM, it changes character. Then it becomes a beast of an engine, and there's a huge surge of power. In the lower rev range, you can just float on the immense amount of torque that this engine has, and in the higher rev range, yeah, you have to be careful. This thing is really fast. It passes 100 kilometers an hour with ease in second gear. Speaking of gears, transmission, I recall that I got a press release saying that Toyota had developed a 6-speed manual transmission for this car. It was long awaited by enthusiasts of the Supra, but it quickly became clear it was in majority a BMW gearbox that was a little bit reworked by Toyota. Toyota calls this an intelligent manual transmission, and the part that makes it intelligent is that the clutch is monitored, and what it does when you wind the engine out, really pull through, and you depress the clutch but you don't lift the accelerator. The software, the drivetrain software, prevents the engine from overshooting in gears. And on the other side of the spectrum, when you downshift, it automatically gives really nice throttle blips. Now, I have been looking if that's an option you can switch off via the center screen in the car, but I haven't been able to find it. It always does those nice downshift blips and does it very, very nicely. Sounds great too. But anyway, more of this drivetrain and how it performs you'll see in the drive segment. Let's just have a quick peek in the cargo space to see how practical this car is. And it is surprisingly practical. Now, it may be just me, but I haven't been able to find a button anywhere to release the trunk, not under here, so I always use the key to unlock the trunk lid, which is nice and large. So you have a little parcel shelf over here, and you can put that in. There are instructions over here, but it's a fairly usable trunk, especially when you compare this car with the Lexus LC, 290 liters. If you use this car for a long road trip and you have to take your clean clothes and your daily supplies with you, this really is practical, especially because there is no rear seat of course, and there is also not a body pod in there. You can stow it underneath there. Let me get the camera. So here's my camera bag. Let's pull that aside. If you look at that, you can see the backs of the rear seats. There are the speakers there and there. You can also put some small groceries there. You can get from the passenger seat if need be. So anyway, I find this trunk fairly usable. Of course, it doesn't have an electric trunk opener, and yeah, I couldn't find a button to open it, but that can be just me. Anyway, let's close this up and we'll have a peek in the interior of this car. Now, before I get into the Toyota GR Supra, I want to point out that getting in and out isn't as easy as you may expect, and that's not because of the height of this car, but it has more to do with the door opening. As you can see, the seat is pretty far forward in the door opening, and the dashboard is actually, or the windscreen is pretty far forward into the interior. So really have to squeeze myself in between here, and now I have the door fully opened. That's very easy. But when you're parked next to another car and you can't swing the door completely open, it's pretty hard to get in and out. So let's have a quick look around. You could call this interior cramped, you could call it cozy, but the fact of the matter is that this interior is highly functional. It fits like a glove. It took me a couple of days to get used to this car because the controls are a bit different than in the cars that I regularly drive. That's because this is all BMW. So the light switches aren't over here on the start. They're over here in a small cluster. The infotainment system is quite different than in Toyotas and all, but I like this system, especially the added controller that BMW's iDrive has, but also the size of this screen. It's really highly functional. I like that a lot. And the rest of the controls, the HX controls and the radio buttons are over here. That's all BMW. The instrument cluster, now we'll switch the car on for this. There's a real modest bark at startup, nothing as dramatic as the Lexus LC did. I like this much better. So we have a tachometer. There's an additional panel over here for extra information like navigation data. Normally this is blacked out. The board computer over here, the time, temperature, speed. It's pretty simple. Let's switch it off so you can hear me. But the fuel indicator and the coolant gauge over here are a bit crude. There are only 7 bars in each, and when I was driving this car I could see the fuel gauge drop pretty fast, and that's not because that this car has a very high fuel consumption. The fuel tank itself isn't all that large, only 52 liters. Could be a bit larger for a car of this nature, I would say. Seats. Very nice sport seats, unique to the special edition. Leather and Alcantara, nice stitching in there. Yeah, it's black on black. Oh yeah, and here you can see those cutouts in the roof. You have this double bubble roof, and that's not done for aesthetics. If you're actually wearing a helmet in this car on track days, you need that additional height. So it's not aesthetics, it's purely functional. On the center console, so you have a place to store your phone. There is not a place for your sunglasses. There is a wireless charger, I believe. Gear shift lever, BMW gearbox. You have this nice carbon inlay that other cars don't get. But since this is a race car, and in a race car, or it's a tribute to a race car, in a race car less is more, so this GR Supra GT4 Special Edition misses some things that the regular Supras do have, and those are heated seats. It doesn't have that. It does not have a head-up display, and also there is no adaptive cruise control, because the adaptive cruise control only works with the automatic transmission, and they didn't make changes to the system so it can work in cars with a manual transmission. One thing that I need to point out, because it's getting warm, it's pretty moist at this moment. There's a thunderstorm incoming and we have a weather alarm. So I want to start a car and have the AC running. The reason I'm mentioning that is that the AC is pretty modest in its performance on warmer days like this. Yeah, the amount of cool air coming from the fans is less than average, I would say. Not sure what causes that. It's a calibration of the system. I mean, this is a brand new car. It's only 3 months old, so it should function. But it's one thing that I noticed, that I found the AC, well, not all too impressive. But anyway, let's wrap up this segment and go for a drive and see what this car is all about. Alrighty, and we're on our way. So recently I drove the LC500, which had much more audio drama, so to speak. The bark on the startup, also the interior noise with the induction being fed into the interior. The Supra doesn't have all that, and when you drive this car just coming out of an LC500, you kind of expect the same kind of drama, but the Supra doesn't have that. I was driving in 4th gear, doing 60 kilometers an hour, 1800 RPM, and you can barely hear the engine. The thing that you'll hear the most is the tire noise. That's what you get in a car like this, and especially those Michelin tires are super sticky, so the loose little stones of the road are constantly ticking inside the wheel wells. But then the engine itself, you don't hear all that much. Now, when Toyota introduced the manual transmission for the Supra, they not only did some rework on this BMW transmission, they also reworked the rear differential, and as a result of the reworked rear differential, the car has a much shorter final drive. I believe the automatics get 3.11 to 1 ratio, and this has a 3.46 to 1 final drive ratio, which is much shorter. At this moment I'm driving in 6th gear, doing 60 kilometers an hour, and the engine is already doing 1500 RPM. And that's where peak torque of this engine starts. So, and I wiggle my toes in my shoes, push the accelerator a little bit, there's 85. So it's a close ratio gearbox with a short final drive. Means that the engine is revving quite a bit for its size, but it also means that it just spurts away even if you just tickle the throttle a little bit. And when you floor this car, it really flies off. So the change in the rear differential, that ratio, makes this car real quick, probably quicker than the automatic transmission. I'm not sure about that, but yeah, it just flies away. But on the other hand, it's pretty easy to calm along slowly and calmly in this car. I just flick it in 6th gear, as I said, doing 60 over here, and it's a real calm cruiser. There are things that took me some getting used to, and there are some things that I really like. One thing that I really like is the gearbox. Even though this is a transmission capable of handling 500 Newton meters of torque at already 1500 RPM, the gear shifts are very nice, very crisp. It's a bit different than what I'm used to from BMW gearbox. They could be a bit harsh in the shifting, but the shifter feel is just great. And when you downshift, I'm going from 6th to 3rd now, and listen, there's perfect throttle blip. I like that really much. As I said, I don't think you can switch it off, and it does also have a function when you're under hard acceleration. You push the clutch, but you didn't release the accelerator in time. The software cuts off power to the engine so you don't overshoot in revs, which is really nice. I must say that it took some time for me to get used to doing the upshifts nice and crisp, but you can really shift this gearbox really fast because it's a very close ratio gearbox. So I personally had to get adjusted to that, but after a couple of days of driving, it grew on me. The second thing that is typical BMW and that I really like, and that's one of the big pros of this car for me, is the steering. The steering feel, the amount of power assist, and the ratio to me is just perfect. It feels like more like something you would have in a comfortable car. The steering is so incredibly precise and you have so much feel in here. It's suitable for calm cruising, but even if you would track this car all day long, the steering to me is just perfect. And it's something that I wouldn't say Toyota is not capable of, but Toyota steering systems are just different. Okay, let's give it a go on speed bump road, because speed bump, the suspension is stiff, the ride is bumpy, especially on brick roads, bad roads, but overall the ride comfort is pretty darn good, and that's something that I didn't expect from a car that had GT4 in its name. And also another thing that I notice is that the suspension is very quiet. Yes, you do hear the tires, you can hear that the tires are very sticky, but the suspension itself is really quiet, so that tells me that they used reasonably soft bushings in the suspension, in the control arms and whatnot in there. So that's very soft. Speed bump, yeah, no noises there. I've done this road a couple of times in in an MX-5, in a Subaru BRZ, and then you could really hear the suspension work, but not in this car. Not something that I expected. Okay, let's slow down a little bit, drop it to 3rd gear. Okay, we're doing 2000 RPM, and listen. So that's all 3rd gear, and it wasn't hard to pass the speed limit, let's just put it that way. Anyway, you can hear the shift in the audio. I said that the tone of this engine is real nice in the under the hood segment, especially on the 3000 RPM. There's a nice hum in there. Listen. But at 30,000 RPM the tone seems to shift a little bit, and it sounds like they added artificial engine noises in the interior. However, I've been looking in the system, in the car settings, if there is such a thing for this model and that I can switch it off, but I haven't been able to find anything. So the engine noise in the interior can sound a little bit fake. The car sounds best in the exterior. On the downshifts it has a nice rumble, a nice crackle now and then. Not too much, but it's nice to have. So in the overrun, when you release the accelerator, there's an incidental pop or crackle, but it doesn't do that all the time. Very, very functional, I would say. So now we're doing a little bit of comfortable cruising. It's time to discuss the fuel economy of this car. As I said, I first thought the car was guzzling gas by looking at the fuel gauge, but in fact it's not all that bad. Brochure states that the fuel economy is around 8 liters per 100 kilometers, but when I drive on this background and I do an incidental acceleration burst, my fuel economy averages out at around 9 liters per 100 kilometer. Not bad, not great, but something that you might expect from a car that has 340 horsepower, top speed of 250, yeah, and isn't this fast. So no complaints there. So we're close to the highway. Let's do an on-ramp run, and then we'll wrap up this driving segment. Starting from second gear. So effortless. And the engine, even though it's an under square engine, yeah, it's so eager to rev out. Beautiful engine, nothing else to say. But anyway, I have touched upon all my talking points for this drive segment. Let's just head out to the middle of nowhere where I'll give my final thoughts. See you in a minute. When word got out that Toyota was developing a new Supra, Toyota fans, Supra fans all over the world were super enthusiastic, until they heard it would be a cooperation with BMW, and people feared that it would end up as some kind of rebadged BMW. But look at it, by no stretch of the imagination is this a rebadged BMW. It's a car with a complete own design, and when you see this car in real life, it's super impressive. One thing that stands out for me in this design is that it is much smaller than I expected. I somehow expected this car to be the same size as the Lexus LC500 that I drove a couple of weeks ago, but it's a much smaller car. And everywhere I go with this car, it's met with enthusiasm. In the LC500, people go either whoa and ask what is it, or they would call me a poser. That literally happened when I was filming the car. But this car, people don't yell whoa, people yell whoa, a Supra. This car is known all over the country. First hour that I drove this car, I had to do some groceries, and the car was photographed at least 10-15 times on the way there with the local car spotter guys, those small guys. So anyway, this is something special, and it's very well known to the general public. That kind of surprised me. When you start digging deeper, yeah, you can see where the BMW influences are, and that's not a bad thing. In fact, I think it's a good thing. I think without BMW, Toyota would not have been able to pull this off. When you consider this a Mark V Supra, which it is in fact, and you look at the Mark IV and Mark III, it's really in line with those cars. The important question of this test is threefold. Should you get a 4-cylinder or a 6-cylinder? Which transmission should you get? And should you buy this GT4 Special Edition, as long as they are available? Starting with the engine, I think the 4-cylinder with 260 horsepower is fast enough for this car. 260 horsepower, 400 Newton meter, no complaints there. But if you want to keep in spirit with the original Supras, yeah, you need to have a straight 6. There you have it, the B58. It's declared the Holy Grail by Jack of Savage Geese, and he's not wrong, I can tell you that. Now, do you get an automatic? Do you get a manual transmission? Well, I've never driven the Supra with the automatic transmission, and personally after this test I don't feel the need to. I would go with the manual transmission. It's more in line with the original Supras, I think. Those were available with an automatic transmission, but the real driving pleasure of those cars and this 5th generation Supra is in the manual transmission. The upshifts, the gear shift feeling, the blips on the downshift, it's an amazing transmission, and I think that's the one to go for. Straight 6 manual transmission. Now then there's the question of the GT4. Do you get it? Well, I somehow expected this car to be much more hardcore, and suspension and steering would be quite a handful on slower roads, on the back roads that I just driven, but it does cruising pretty good, and as said, the suspension setup is much more comfortable than I expected. GT doesn't get you a race car, GT does get you a grand tourer. It really is a grand tourer. If you like doing long road trips and you have to take a lot of stuff with you, you have to know this car is actually pretty practical. It has a nice cargo area, and for long stretches on the Autobahn, on highway, it's a great car. Yes, it's a bit short gear, so that does increase the fuel consumption, but after a week of test driving it, my average fuel consumption is 8.5 liters per 100 kilometers. Getting back to the GT4 Special Edition part, there really aren't much changes to the drivetrain, the suspension and all. It's just more cosmetic part on the exterior, on the interior. And if you really want this color, then you have to get the GT4 edition. So in technical terms, there aren't much changes to the regular Supra. It's just cosmetic changes to the exterior and the interior of this car, and they got rid of some luxury like the heated seats and the head-up display, and those are nice things to have. So personally I would not make a run to the dealer to get my hands on one of the 100 of these special editions, but if you do like this color, if you do like this exterior, you have to be fast. But anyway, if you want a really comfortable cruiser that's very capable on track, on mountain roads, and it's very nice to drive long stretches on the Autobahn or highway, the Supra with straight 6 manual transmissions is the car to get. And with that, I want to wrap up this real life car review. I hope you liked following me along, and if you did, please let me know by subscribing to the channel. Give me a like, put on notifications, and if you have any questions or constructive feedback, let me know down below in the comment section. I try to answer to all the comments and questions I get. And also, if you want to help support the channel, you can do so by buying me a coffee. For that, I leave the link down below in the description box. For now, I would like to thank you for watching, and I hope to see you on the next one. Bye!